You don't have any questions out of your discussion group then? Everything was pretty okay? Yeah? No question. Good, wonderful. Oh, actually not wonderful. Our Geshe always says if you deal with Dharma and you don't have questions afterwards, probably you didn't go very deep. The thing is that actually the Dharma is normally describing things which are counterintuitive. Yeah, the Buddha and his Dharma are talking about a path that is so different from our normal life, and is teaching ways of approaching things so different from how we normally approach them, that normally they should be startling. How can he say everything is in the nature of suffering? Yeah, how can he say that? Or how can he say that the root of all our experience is a certain kind of ignorance or misperception? What is he talking about? Yeah. So on the one hand, Buddha Dharma is therefore sometimes quite startling, quite shocking in what the Buddha has to say. On the other hand, there is no surprise here, because we have been living samsaric lives and trying to become happy on the basis of samsaric tools and methods and so forth since, as we always say, since beginningless lives, since time periods unperceivable, and we haven't gotten anywhere. Like right now, we have attained a so-called precious human rebirth. First of all, a human rebirth, which is difficult to attain, and within that, a human rebirth that has access to Dharma communities, Dharma teachers, Dharma books, and Dharma centers, and so forth. Yeah, so very special. But we are still in samsara. Yeah, so we're still gonna get sick, especially now here. We have this threat of sickness with the virus around us. We're still aging while we're talking here. We're running out of time while we're talking here. We're definitely gonna die. We are under the power of our karma and afflictions. We're gonna take more rebirths, even so forth. Yeah, so all the methods that we have been using up to now have gotten us to this point, which is not too bad within samsara, but it has not gotten us out of the actual problem, which is this death and then rebirth and then redeath and aging and sickness and all this kind of things. So the methods that we are normally relying on, and the methods that are kind of making sense to us in the sense of that they're familiar to us, are the ones that don't work. Or rather, they are working, they're very effective, they are producing samsara all the time. So if we want to do something radically different and have a completely different experience, we will have to rely on completely different methods. So it shouldn't be surprising that what the Buddha has to offer in order to bring us out of samsara is something so radically different that sometimes it feels like, is he serious? Does he really mean that? Yeah. So really, really radical. Like to some extent, I always say, like, spirituality, if it is really going beyond just kind of having a certain tradition, feeling at home and identifying with the culture and so forth, if it's really spirituality, that something that works with the spirit, it's going to be a revolution. It's going to change things big time. I mean, I guess as far as I remember, you would find things in the Bible where Christ says things to this extent, that he will change things dramatically. Yeah, so he's also on this level of spirituality is going to be very different from what normally is going on. So spirituality will always be a kind of a revolution. So therefore, Buddha says things like that. Everything is in the nature of suffering. Says that we are completely afflicted, that we are constantly hallucinating, that we're constantly perceiving things that are not there, that we constantly have under the power of ignorance, and that unless we stop hallucinating, we will never get out of samsara. So that's, we touched on this last time, and we talked about this this suffering, how things are in the nature of suffering, how they're not satisfactory, how we actually, like, how the very core of our existence is that we want to be happy and we don't want to suffer. And it's very important to relate to this level, because this is the level that we have in common with each and every living being. Everything else might be different. Our species might be different, our gender might be different, what have you, yeah? But that's the thing that we have all in common. Everything that's alive wants to be happy and doesn't want to suffer. Also, the Buddha does not want to suffer. He's definitely beyond that anyway, and he is very much engaged into bringing about happiness to others. But within that, he is not kind of looking for suffering. Yeah, so he's also completely liberated from suffering, and he is in the state actually of highest bliss. So he has definitely fulfilled his own aims completely, but he's gone way beyond that, and he's actually fulfilling the aims of others by now. So that's kind of a much higher goal even. So, so on that basis that we want to be happy and we don't want to suffer, on that basis, the question is something happiness or is it suffering? And we also heard last time that happiness and suffering itself is a what we call a feeling or a sensation. So with any kind of experience, with any kind of moment of mind, you're gonna have many different aspects together with it. And one of the aspects that's always going to be there is the aspect of feeling or sensation. And what this is referring to is that you will always experience a certain mental interaction with an object as either a neutral feeling or a pleasant feeling or an unpleasant feeling. And what we are looking for is pleasant feelings. What we don't want is unpleasant feelings. The bliss of the Buddha is a pleasant feeling. Also, the Buddha has this kind of feeling. Any mind, even the enlightened mind of a Buddha, has this kind of feeling factor with it. Any mind is kind of almost characterized by having these kind of factors with them, one of these factors being feeling. Then there's other beings that are not enlightened, but they're liberated from samsara. They also experience a bliss of liberation. That also is this factor of feeling, is a pleasant feeling. And we also have pleasant feelings. There's no denial of that. It's not that Buddhism is denying that we have joy and happiness and even some peaceful states at times. And sometimes feel safe, sometimes feel at home, sometimes feel integrated part of some things. We feel very generous all of a sudden, or we enjoy something very, very much, and so forth. So there's no denying of that. That's definitely clear. We had states of mind that were accompanied by a sensation that was pleasant. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for happiness. So different from that, we talked about what is something that is in the nature of happiness. Yeah, so you can have something that is happiness and is in the nature of happiness, and you can have something that is happiness that is in the nature of suffering. You cannot have in general, let's say, you cannot have a suffering that is in the nature of happiness. So I'm pretty confident with that statement. We can talk about certain things, but anyway, in general, this is the case. The suffering is just the nature of suffering. The point is that our so-called contaminated happiness is also in the nature of suffering. So why is a pleasant feeling, a happy feeling, a happiness contaminated? Why is it in the nature of suffering? So a feeling is contaminated if it is contaminated by karma and afflictions. Yeah? If you have a certain kind of feeling that accompanies a certain kind of mind that is born out of a previous state of affliction, of karma maybe also ripening and so forth, then that feeling that you have there is happiness, it's a pleasant feeling, but it's a contaminated happiness. It will also be, because it is contaminated, it will not be able to last. It will not be something that can actually fulfill you. It will not be the answer of your wish to become happy and not to suffer. Because I always emphasize this wish to become happy is not just the wish for some kick. It's the wish for a lasting and everlasting, a state of being, experience of joy. Yeah? So that's what we're actually looking for. And as I always say, that it might, like, as we have never experienced that, actually, we have never had an everlasting joy, because otherwise we would be joyful all the time, right? And everlasting joy would never end, so we would constantly be in that. So we have never experienced this. So when I thought about this myself, at one point I thought to myself, well, if we have never experienced this, are we really looking for that? We don't know another joy apart from having one kick after another kick after another kick, having one relationship after another relationship, coming home, drinking a Coke or whatever, then kind of having a nap, getting up, watching television, have some food with it, go to bed again, get up in the morning, somehow coffee, and then out, and then other people try to get a seat somewhere, maybe you can go on the train, then being there, trying to be respected by colleagues and stuff like that, constantly, like one kick after the other. So we have never experienced something else. Are we really looking for an everlasting happiness? That was my question at one point. And I think we can see this happening when we are, like one of the things that we have very strongly is we grasping at things being permanent that are actually impermanent. So we grasp at things as being not changing, being permanent, when they're actually changing all the time. So they go into different phases and change in what they are. And so, for example, relationships. Yeah? So I think we all might have experienced that with a certain kind of relationship, we have the hope that we might have here a relationship that will last forever. Yeah. So here we are really, especially in relationships, we are hoping that this is gonna do the trick. It's something lasting. Yeah. And we might have other things, similar things. I don't know. Maybe it could be, it doesn't have to be for everybody the same, but it could be that somebody buys a car, maybe a new car, and you feel like the experience is like, this is going to last. Yeah, well, in no time, actually, it's not going to last. You have to refill the tank, because it's not going to work without that. So for that, you have to have money, and then you have to queue, and it's getting all the problem, and you just wanted to go from A to B, but you didn't have the oil, and happiness is already gone. And then you have to repair it, and then it decays and stuff. So what the first feeling might be, this is going to last, or maybe with a house and some maybe. So I think in all this, in these kind of situations, like I don't think that anybody thinks going to a pizza restaurant, having some pizza is going to last. I think everybody's very aware of this, it's not going to last. But with other things, we have this more long-term perspective, and that's what we're looking for, to have this kind of security, or this kind of support, or this kind of constant access to something that is giving us maybe security or happiness. So with regard to this kind of joy or happiness experiences that we all have, the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, he has said in one of his writings that all joy desires eternity, desires deep, deep eternity. And that's quite shocking for somebody who's not Buddhist and has not thought about this stuff to say about that. So he's expressing right there this thing what the Buddha is saying. You're wanting to be happy and you don't want to suffer. And that happiness that you're looking for is a lasting, fulfilling, deep, deep, eternal happiness. And we're far from that. Even those things that we might go in order to have a long-term fulfillment, like relationships and so forth, might not last. We might have to change a lot within the relationship in order for it to last. This is what his own is often saying. So he said, that, I don't know if he says it often, but at one point I heard him say that when relationships normally in the world are formed, then in the beginning there might be some simply sexual attraction. But if that doesn't change at one point into an actual love and compassion, into an actual caring for the other person beyond the attraction, then it will not last. Because exactly this attraction is a complete projection and will dissolve at one point, just like with anything else. Yeah, so it has to change. So in order for this kind of relationship to last longer, we need to change within it, and we need to put work into it and so forth. Yeah? It's not going to work just like that. Anyway, so my point being, like, all these things I think need to be reflected by ourselves. Yeah? Like when it is said that we want to be happy, we don't want to suffer. Is that so? We want to be happy in the sense that we're looking for a lasting, maybe everlasting fulfillment. Is that so? Because if not, then we can. If we don't look for everlasting fulfillment, then what's the point for us with getting these teachings on nirvana and stuff like this? We're not looking for that. Yeah. So Like especially when we talk about, like I was presenting last time a little bit this Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truth is a teaching from what we call in the Lamrim the spirituality of somebody of middling capacity. Yeah, maybe just to recap, there is this 3 levels in the Lamrim. The first one is talking about that you're a being of small capacity. So you are doing a spiritual path, but it's kind of the lowest, the minimum. But this minimum is already amazing. It is somebody who has understood that he's going to die, that the mind is eternal and indestructible, that the shape the mind takes is determined by karma and afflictions, and that he will take a rebirth on the basis of karma and afflictions, and that karma and afflictions can be manipulated, can be governed. You can stir the ship of your mind through the space of reality and influence what kind of rebirth you're taking. That's amazing. This person becomes a master over death. He understands death, understands the death process, has reflected on this, has integrated that, and is understanding that this mind of his can generate whole lives, and that he has right now the capacity to work with this mind in a form that he can influence not only the next life, but myriads of lives into the future. Very, very powerful manipulating of the cosmic workings of the world. Yeah, so that's the bare minimum of spirituality in Buddhism. This is where it starts. You have to become a master of death, manipulating like a wizard of death. So the next one, the middling scope, is somebody who is not wanting to manipulate the process of death. He wants to break the process of death, the mechanics of the world. He wants to destroy the universe. He wants to go out of samsara and enter into a completely different form of existence. He wants to go for nirvana. So that's the level for which the Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths. Yeah, the Four Noble Truths show how you get out of samsara into nirvana. The Four Noble Truths show what samsara is, the causes of samsara, what nirvana is, and the causes of nirvana. Yeah, so everything is contained within this Four Noble Truths. So therefore, actually, it's a huge, huge, huge topic that can be unfolded over days and weeks and stuff like this. So that's where it is. And then the highest level is, of course, that you don't just want to be liberated from samsara yourself, but you actually want to gain the capacity to help all sentient beings, all the infinite life forms, to get out of samsara. So you're not just going to destroy the mechanics of your own suffering universe, but you're going to destroy the suffering universe of all sentient beings. So as all sentient beings are limitless, then you will have to come up with some limitless capacity. So you would have to become a Buddha, an omniscient, all-pervading Buddha, in order to help all sentient beings. And I'm not going to go into this today because we're still on this topic of the Four Noble Truths. But if you study in detail about the different paths and practices that lead up to Buddhahood, at one point you get a feel for what this Buddha being is, which is just kind of unimaginable. Yes, I always say, like, the Buddha is not a happy, friendly man sitting smiling under a tree in India. The Buddha is an amazing phenomenon pervading all of the universes with unconditional love and compassion, manifesting wherever it's possible. So many of these words they just used are probably difficult to understand what this could even refer to. So that's what a Buddha is, and what happened in India was just one manifestation out of this endless phenomenon or dimension of enlightenment. So there was a manifestation there and taught the Dharma, which is most fortunate for us. So on the highest level, you try to become something like that in order to benefit all sentient beings. So definitely yet amazingly higher practice than what we talk about even with regard to somebody of the middle scope who is breaking the workings of the universe, breaking samsara, the mechanics of samsara. He's not just kind of influencing and manipulating the death process, he's destroying the death process. He's going to go to a state which is called the deathless. He's going to the state of the deathless because death is part of this suffering experience. Yeah? Death is one of the 8 types of suffering. Suffering of dying, of death, which is characterizing all these bubbles that we are experiencing in samsara, and where we identify with all kinds of things, and where we feel home and identify and connect and know our way around, and to be able to live in this bubble as a human, as a fish, whatever. And then we die, and the whole bubble completely is destroyed. You're no longer part of that. The whole world, all the references, all the objects are gone. So that's pretty devastating. This is like all the relationships are gone, for example, all your family relationships, all your relationships to other people outside the family, friends, even enemies are gone. Yeah? So nothing. Yeah? So that's one of the types of suffering. So if we want to experience a lasting fulfillment, we will have to go beyond death. And we will have to, if we want to get rid of all the suffering, we will have to get rid of the 8 types of suffering, of which one is the suffering of death. Let me see if I get this together. This is the suffering of birth, the suffering of sickness, the suffering of aging, the suffering of death, the suffering that you encounter the unwished for. You encounter what you don't want to encounter. The suffering that you don't encounter what you wish for. The suffering that your wishes are not fulfilled, that you are not successful. And then the suffering of samsara in general. Yeah, so that like a general suffering that is encompassing all the suffering of samsara in a general way. So this is one way of discussing this situation of samsara. There's another way of discussing 6 types of suffering. There's a type of talking about 3 types of suffering, 4 types of suffering. So it's a huge topic. So my point is that this topic, which is definitely not a nice topic, it's not a topic that is very pleasant to listen to and stuff like this, yeah. But is a necessary topic to deal with in order to generate a wish to get liberated from that. If you do not understand your spiritual sickness, you will not want from the bottom of your heart to apply a spiritual medicine or a spiritual practice. And without taking a medicine, there's no cure. You cannot get healthy. So you will stay sick. So that's why in refuge, very often the Buddha is referred to as a doctor, and the Dharma as a medicine, and the Sangha as those who help you in taking the medicine and so forth. So what the doctor is doing, he is actually prescribing the medicine. Yeah? So first of all, he is indicating what kind of sickness you have. Right? He tells you, so you have this and this kind of sickness because this and this kind of processes are going on. So in order to do something with that, I tell you, you should kind of eat in this way, you should do this kind of exercise, or you should take this kind of medicine. And then the nurses will help you to do that training and to do this exercise and to eat in a certain way, and they will give you the medicine, they will give you some injections, I don't know what. Yeah? So that's the idea. And within all of that, if you don't go and rely on a doctor, nothing will happen. So you will first have to admit to yourself that there's a problem going on. I need to get some input. I want to see a doctor. I want to rely on a doctor. So that's already a big step to connect with this level of I want to be happy and I don't want to suffer. But my reality is that I'm having misunderstandings and problems and frustrations every day. And that's a painful experience. And I didn't want to have painful experiences. I wanted to be happy and I didn't want to suffer. What's going on here? Why do I never get that what I'm actually longing for? Yeah, so that's the first thing we need to touch on, that level inside of us that actually wants happiness and wants not to suffer, wants a pacification of all problems, wants to be free of all problems, and wants to have a fulfilled life. And then stay with that wish. Because what normally is happening is this. Probably if you say to somebody anywhere in the street, in a restaurant, you just kind of walk up to somebody and say, what do you think? Do you think you want to be happy? Or do you rather want to suffer? He would probably say, no, I prefer to be happy. And so you ask the person, so how's your life going? He said, yeah, I'm happy. I'm having that job. I just bought myself a new car. I'm sitting in this restaurant, which I can afford, and my relationship is going well, and so forth. So instead of checking the state of mind, the answer to are you happy is yes, I have this. So I'm fine. I have this. The question is not if you have this, 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 this. The question is, does that make you happy? You need to check back. What kind of state are you in while you have that car, while you have that job, while you have that conversation? Yeah. So to stay on that level, I want to be happy and I don't want to suffer. And I'm going to live my life on that level. And if something is going to make me suffer, I'm going to question it. I'm not just going to accept that, because my life is not going according to my deepest wishes. I'm going to check out, why am I suffering? What's going on here? I'm not just going to swallow and walk on because things are just fine, because I have this job and that car and that house and that so forth. I'm going to check. I'm going to stop. Wait a minute, what's going on? Means spirituality is necessarily connected to looking inside and being very much in contact with yourself, up to the point where you at any moment can connect with yourself. And at any moment, there's a kind of a basic willingness to turn inside and check, where are we? This is definitely key to anything. I guess this would be even key to if you would do a psychological treatment and they would tell you to maybe change your way of interacting with people. You definitely would have to apply some awareness how you are actually interacting and then change it right in the moment, right? So anyway, my point is, we need to get to this level where we actually live our life out of this feeling that I want to be happy and I don't want to suffer. Yeah? Check again and again and again. And on that basis, then, we can have an actual deeply felt approach to this topic of suffering, rather than having an intellectual approach. Yeah, where we kind of say, oh, the Buddhism says this and this, which is defined like this and this, and there's so many types of that and that. So you look at the 8 types of suffering and you find them in your life. And when you have a certain kind of problematic situation, or you find yourself being kind of sad or blocked or whatever, you can identify which of the 8 it is. And then you get a feel of that this is going on very, very, very often. And then you finally get a feel like, I wonder if it has to be like that. Maybe I should see a doctor. And that's the moment where you take refuge. Yeah, you go to the Buddha for help. You need a refuge, you need support, you need protection. Something's going wrong here. I want to be happy, I don't want to suffer. And instead, I have constant misunderstanding. I'm constantly afraid. I'm constantly worried. I'm constantly feeling lonely and stuff. And I'm aging in all of that. So if you do not have this this feeling for that there is some input or some expert help needed, then we will not go for that expert help. And it will just be, and our Buddhism and our spirituality will just be an intellectual game. Also fine. We can add this to the many, many ways in which we try to be happy. It's another game. Fine.
Fine, but not constructive.
No, it will not be, you wouldn't get that far. Yeah? I mean, you know, I would not underestimate how much people actually get kind of a feeling of being home or belonging by relying on their respective religions or traditions. But that in itself doesn't make it a spirituality. A spirituality wants to change something. Yeah, you can rely on a religion because it was always like that. Something for, you can rely on it for stability. But spirituality is actually about change. Not to stay in this state because you're sick. Anyway, I personally, but this is just a personal choice. Other people might do it differently. I use the word religion for that what we are clinging to as an identity, as a tradition, as something that gives us spirituality, stability and a home, and an identity, and spirituality for the revolution part. So the Buddha is into spirituality. And he's been in spirituality because he feels like that we are not achieving what we're looking for. So from that point of view, something is pretty wrong. We want to be happy, we don't want to suffer. Instead of that, we have actual suffering of suffering. We have some kicks, some joys, which are also in the nature of suffering, and we do not have access to a lasting fulfillment. And what the Buddha is saying, you are entitled to have a lasting fulfillment. It is your nature, it is your birthright to have a fulfillment that lasts forever. Your deepest longings are not hallucinations. There is such a thing. But you're walking the wrong road. You will not get there. They even use this term, the city of liberation. Yeah? So the path to the city of liberation. You're walking the wrong road. This road is not, the road that you are taking is not going to the city of liberation. There is liberation. You don't want to suffer. There is pacification of all suffering. There is liberation from all suffering. There's a liberation from samsara. There's a state of life that is fulfilled without pain, without suffering, without anything. The nature of the suffering is a fulfilling happiness that this exists. What you're longing for in the depth of your heart exists. But you're taking the wrong road. And you're taking the wrong road since many, many, many lives. Not since yesterday or last year or 10 years ago. Since many lives. So if we don't get to this level of actually understanding how we want this fulfillment, how we want to have pacification of our suffering, then we will not come to the understanding how we don't get what we're looking for, and then we will not have the actual motivation to rely on the doctor, on the Buddha as a spiritual doctor. So the point is that if somebody who's sick is not going to the doctor can have studied and the medicine as much as he wants. He will never be able to heal this person. He will not be able to be beneficial to this person. So you need to make the first step. So if you think you have a problem, you go to the doctor and says, like, doctor, something's going wrong in my spiritual stomach, my spiritual setup, you know. I don't know what's up, but somehow I don't want to suffer, but every day I'm getting worn out, I'm getting blocked, I'm getting worried, I'm having miscommunications, sometimes I'm in tears, and I'm aging all the time, and I lost family members because they were dying, and other people are full of violence. Yesterday I got beaten up and robbed and stuff like this. I'm afraid that it's going to happen again and stuff like this. So I don't know where this is all coming from. What can you tell me, doctor? And the doctor says, look, this is all a process. I find in your spiritual kind of makeup or organism, I find that there's processes going on that are governed by something which is a karma, like a virus, and that you have afflictions going on which are hallucinating about the world, so you're not in contact with what's actually going on. And on the basis of all of this, there's a basic misunderstanding about how you exist and how the world exists. That's my diagnosis. You're spiritually sick. And the effect of that is that you only have kicks, but mainly you have sufferings, and you die. And then you take another bubble where you have mainly kicks, but a lot of suffering, and then you die. And you have another bubble where you have some kicks, and or maybe there's actually even bubbles where there is no kicks. There's only suffering. Anyway, so he says this and this is going on. He gives a description of your sickness. And then he says, so the good thing about this kind of sickness that you're suffering from is that it has a cure. Yeah, so this is not necessarily the case. You can go to a doctor. Doctor does tests and finds out you have this and this and this, and there's no cure. Like, for example, right now, if you have the coronavirus, there's just no cure. If you have it bad, there's no vaccine. There is medication seems to be absent, at least for the strong cases, something like that. That's anyway. Okay, certain kinds of cancer and stuff like that. So this could be the case. It could be the case that the Buddha is analyzing our spiritual condition and finds out it comes from this and this and this, and sorry, there's no cure. You're doomed. You're designed to have suffering. You're designed for being unpeaceful. You're designed for living in a bubble, identifying with this, and then the whole bubble bursts because you die. And then you take another bubble, and then you identify with that, and then you lose everything because the bubble bursts and you die. That's just how things are. So the Buddha says it's not like this. There's a cure. This can be done away with. You do not have to continue with this kind of strange state of wanting to be happy and not to suffer and suffering all the time. You don't have to continue like that, because there's a mechanism behind your experiences, and that mechanism can be broken and can be done away with. Yeah? And so this cure, he describes the cure, he gives you the cure, which is the true path, what to practice. And it turns out that path is not easy. Yeah, not such a surprise if the problem in our mind is cosmic and is existing since beginningless times through unbelievable amounts of rebirth and so forth. And the Buddha is going way beyond deep psychology to describe what's actually going on. Then it should not be kind of surprising that to break that mechanism that was working in our minds since beginningless time will not go away overnight. Yeah? So the path to be practiced will take time, will be difficult, and the forces inside of us that keep us in this contaminated state, in this state of samsara, they will work against the path. It's going to be difficult to apply the path, to apply the Dharma. So any help is appreciated. Anybody who's practicing with us, anybody who has already walked part of this path, anybody who is kind of willing to stay with us, practice with us, live with us in certain practices, in certain behaviors, is willing to be an inspiration for us or a role model for us. Anybody that is kind of studying together with us about the Buddha Dharma, so very appreciated. So that's kind of where the Sangha is coming in. Yeah? So the Buddha is the one who's describing our state of affairs, tells us there's a cure. What is the cure? Then he gives us the cure, which is the Dharma. The actual cure is the Dharma. And then we need people who help us with practicing that, applying that. Yeah. So as the Dharma is not so much like actually a pill that you take and then you're out, this kind of medicine, but more like exercises or treatment that you're going to do. Then it makes a lot of sense that you need a Sangha or a group that is doing the treatment with you. It's obvious that let's take this ridiculous example of trying to lose weight. Yeah, let's say you want to try to lose weight by way of going jogging, and you're just not into jogging. I could relate to that. So you're just not into jogging, but you need to be jogging, and the doctor said there's a cure for your state of affairs, and it's jogging. And you just don't want to do it, and you always find excuses, and there's so many other things to do. For example, the kitchen is full of dishes. First you have to do the dishes, and it's already night and I cannot go jogging anymore, and I don't know what. So if you have some friends in the community where people are saying, look, I'm doing this jogging already since some time, and I know cool places to jog, it's going to be really nice. And I also know what kind of shoes we're going to buy for you so that you don't kind of have good conditions for your practicing. So we're going to do this together. And these friends are better than us in jogging, but they're not arrogant. They're not putting it in our face how bad we are at it and making us laugh. But they're very, very, very sensitive. And they really have this good heart and good motivation to help us with this thing, to put into practice what the doctor said, to get some jogging done. And they say, we could do half an hour, just half an hour. We put together half an hour. Afterwards, I know a nice juice bar. They have interesting detox stuff. It's kind of really cool, and they have a nice atmosphere there. We're going to do that, half an hour, and then we go to this detox bar. And then later on, we could do 35 minutes. And then in a month's time, we go 40 minutes. And at one point, we're going to do the path of seeing, kind of completely absorbed into emptiness with single point of concentration, destroying the intellectually acquired afflictions. This is going to be a jogging over 2.5 hours, I guess, or more. Anyway, so that's the idea here. Yeah? That's the idea. So again, the whole thing is anchored on that we want to be happy and we don't want to suffer. And that we have this strong longing for a lasting fulfillment, and that we actually have no tolerance, or no tolerance is maybe the wrong word, but there's no, let's say tolerance, there's no tolerance for any kind of suffering. And we don't want to experience any kind of suffering. We want to have a pacification of all of that, even like a headache, even like being bored, something small. We don't want any of that. We want to have an inspired, happy, open, fresh, active, joyful experience. And all the time. Like this all the time is such that if you would have a very special day where you kind of woke up and you were feeling healthy and energetic and you did a lot of things and you achieved a lot of things and you were happy about what you did, and then you and somebody phoned you and you could help somebody and you were happy about that, and you went out in the sunshine and you did that jogging or whatever, and that wonderful day, and you met people and you talked with them, and then you bought something, you find something that you were looking for a long time, and you found it there, you bought it, brought it home, you were so happy, then you talked with something else, and you learned some language, maybe you did a language course, you learned some language and stuff. It's the whole day very good, and then going for ice cream and I don't know what, yeah? It's not that after, let's say, 8 or 10 hours of joyful experiences, you would say, all right, that's okay. Wow, 10 hours of joyful experiences all the time. That's okay. I'm fine. If now there's some suffering coming, some real pain, that's okay because I had 10 hours of joy. That's okay. It's completely just. I should now have 10 hours of pain, or at least 1 hour of pain. It's not like that. We are never satisfied with happiness. There's no end. We want an everlasting happiness. After 10 hours of joy and energetic and beautiful and wonderful, you want to have another 10 hours. And again, the Buddha is not saying that this is greedy or that it's wrong or something like this. The Buddha said like it's completely fine. And you have the capacity to attain something like that. So that's where it starts, yeah? To become aware of this longing for joy that is never satisfied, such that you would rather go for pain now just to kind of balance it out. So you want to have always happiness. You will always have a freedom of any kind of pain or suffering. On that basis, you check your daily experience against that. And you find out that there's not so much energetic and creative and successful and stuff, but instead you try to be successful, but if this blockage came and this blockage came, you completely blocked. And if you blocked enough and there comes another block and another obstacle, you might explode on that person, and you might be angry and you might be burning inside. You might be in pain because you're so angry. Or maybe you swallow the anger and you burn in your stomach and stuff like that. Or you're getting stressed out, or what have you, or you have miscommunication. You tell somebody, you describe to somebody a situation and the person gets it completely wrong. You feel like, what's up? It's my fault, your fault, all kind of problems all the time. All kind of anger around us, inside of us, and so forth, yeah? So you check your longing, your everlasting longing for happiness against what you're actually experiencing, and you label it for what it is, a problem. Something is not working out. And on that basis, you go to the Buddha for an exploration of what's your state. And the Buddha is saying to you, well, actually your experiences, even the ones where you're eating some ice cream or you're enjoying some peace at the lake and so forth, are actually all the nature of suffering. Because you have a general sickness going on, which is that all your experiences are coming from karma and afflictions. And this is going on because you're completely hallucinating about who you are. And the good thing is that because it's a hallucination, it is something that is not in accordance with reality. That's why it's a hallucination. Therefore, it can be done away with. Yeah? You're not in accordance with reality, but being an intelligent person or being somebody who has a mind that can have correct perceptions, you can do away with this hallucination. You can understand reality and break that hallucination. You're having all this kind of process of karma and afflictions going on in your mind, in all your experiences, and you're taking birth and you're aging and so forth, because you are not understanding who you are. But the good thing is, you can understand who you are. You can work on that. You can replace the hallucination with a waking up. You can awaken by way of wisdom that realizes reality. So there's a cure. The hallucination that causes you this kind of contamination of being full of karmic ripening processes and afflictions that is bringing about that you don't get what you want. You get all kind of suffering experiences and your joy is short-lived. You don't get what you're looking for. All of that can be ended because the hallucination about who you are can be replaced by a complete, clear understanding who you are and how the world exists, and how you relate to your body and to your mind and to your feelings and so forth. So there is a cure. And because there is a cure, the whole process of samsara can be destroyed it can end, it can be annihilated, it can be eliminated, it can cease. There can be a cessation of the actual process in your mind that gives you that suffering or this dissatisfactory experiences. There can be a true cessation. So if you are counteracting the contaminated mechanics in your mind, which is the true origins, by way of a wisdom realizing emptiness, a wisdom realizing reality, then you can break the whole mechanism. And when the mechanism is broken, it's going to be absent. And it's especially no longer working, it's no longer effective, it is no longer producing its result, which is the true suffering. You will no longer have experiences of joy that are short-lived and therefore the nature of suffering, and no suffering experience in the first place. So the result of the true origins will no longer be there. The true sufferings will no longer be there because the true origins will no longer be there. And that's due to the absence of the true origins, an elimination of the true origins, a cessation of the true origins. So that's the state of true cessation. So this is attained by way of the true path. The actual antidote is this true path, which is path consciousnesses that are connected to a direct realization of reality. Yeah? So they're connected to that, and that direct realization of emptiness, that kind of wisdom, this is our actual topic, wisdom out of the three types of higher trainings, ethics, concentration, wisdom. This kind of wisdom, this wisdom that is realizing the reality of things, is that what is counteracting the actual true origin, which is the ignorance or hallucination about how we exist. So just one more word about this hallucination. Actually, the word is ignorance, or one word is also obscuration. One is maripa, and one is dimuk. So this ignorance, like normally when we say ignorance, then it is a state of being ignorant. Yeah? Ignorant means like to not know. So what this ignorance is indeed not knowing is reality, but that's not all. Yeah, so that's why ignorance is kind of misleading, but it's a good translation, literal translation from the Tibetan and Sanskrit. So it's fine. Yeah? So ignorance is fine, but the thing is, it's not just, this factor is not just ignorant. It is hallucinating. It is not just not knowing how we exist, but it is producing a projection. It is producing a world that doesn't exist at all. What do I mean by that? Am I saying that the Buddha doesn't exist at all? Our suffering doesn't exist at all? We are not talking to each other right now at all? The thing is that this ignorance is creating an appearance in our mind of all the objects and of ourselves as existing in a way that is impossible. Actually, it's impossible to exist in this way. It's called inherently or truly existent, findably existent. So we appear to ourselves as if we would have a core. Somehow we could kind of touch it, as if there would be a center, something findable on the side of ourselves. And in the same way, the other person appears to us as being findable, as being truly and inherently existent over there by its own nature. As if there's something, if you would reach out, you could touch into this other person and then touch the actual other person. So that's the appearance that we have. The same thing is true with anything. You have an appearance of an inherent existent table, inherent existent trees, inherent existent sky, birds, animals, waters, rivers, everything. Such a thing, an inherent existent other, an inherent existent self, an inherent existent tree, river, and so forth. Such a thing does not exist at all. There is no such inherently existent things because this is an impossible way of existing. So while there is no inherently existent trees, there are trees. While there is no inherently existent river, there is a river. While there is no inherently existent self, there is a self. So often we hear in Buddhism about selflessness. So the selflessness is talking about the absence of a self that is impossible to exist in this way. So this would be a findable self. This would be an inherently existent self, a truly existent self, and so forth. Yeah? So such a self does not exist. But apart from that, a so-called mere self does exist. So an inherently existent Buddha does not exist at all. But a mere Buddha does exist. A findable Buddha does not exist, but a Buddha that is not findable does exist. So just to indicate a little bit like what is the hallucination, yeah? The ignorance is not just not knowing how we exist, but it is also hallucinating instead a different type of existence that is not there whatsoever. It is hallucinating, instead of seeing beings that are, as we say, illusion-like, or that are actually empty of inherent existence, or that are dependent arising, instead of seeing that, it sees inherently existent beings that are not a dependent arising, that are not relying on other things, that are in and out of themselves existent, findable, having a core. And yourself, and the things that you enjoy, and even something like your joy and your suffering, all of that is perceived in this way. So this is the hallucination. And that what is hallucinated there does not exist whatsoever. So, did somebody ask a question?
Nu, stai liniștit, am rezolvat cu alea.
Poți să te pui, te rog, pe mute? Scuze.
Era așa, te întrebam în cazul în care era pe la
Anca,
birou
poți să
ceva,
dai tu
dar
în
nu, am
mute all?
rezolvat-o.
Ca să fie și așa.
Who's talking to me? Is somebody talking to me?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
Thank you.
Somebody was talking to phone to somebody else, and she has just to unmute herself, but it's fine now. Sorry about that.
Okay, no question. Okay, cool. So that's the point. That the actual root of samsara, the actual true origin, the true origin of the true origins, if you like, this ignorance is not just not knowing how things exist, but it is projecting a reality that is not there whatsoever. And this is talking about that is projecting a reality of things that appear to be existent in a certain way. Yeah, so while there is trees and sky, there's Romania, for example, and France and so forth, but there's no inherent existent Romania, and there's no inherent existent France. This becomes very clear when a rabbit is kind of hopping over the border from Romania to Hungary. He has just so no clue that this blade of grass is Romania and that blade of grass is Hungary, because it's not there, cannot be found. There is no Romania to be found. And there's no doubt that Romania exists at the same time. So that's the thing. The thing about emptiness will all about that. Yeah? It will. You have sutras which are really wonderful. They're just amazing. There's the one sutra is called the Dhammapada Sutra. The Dhammapada Sutra, for me personally, I don't know if it is the same for other people as well. I guess yes, it is also for other people. Like, so I hope it's the same for other people as well. So I really would kind of recommend to you sometimes to recite this Dhammapada Sutra. It takes you half an hour, 45 minutes. And this kind of sutras, which are called the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, these kind of sutras are going all the time something like this. What about the vast universe with all its planets and galaxies? Is that a vast universe? So the Buddha says to one bodhisattva, is that a vast universe? And then the bodhisattva says something like, Lord, it's a vast universe. It's a vast universe. Why is it a vast universe? Because a vast universe, it doesn't even exist. And that's why we can call it a vast universe. A vast universe. Yeah, so this kind of statements that you find in this Perfection of Wisdom Sutras all the time. So it's constantly saying like that thing doesn't exist, and that's why it exists almost, yeah, almost to this level. So the hallucination is about a certain way of existing, and that the ignorance is putting on all phenomena, everything. It is surrounding us while we are speaking, and we have this perception right now. Because of this perception, we have a certain idea about ourselves, about the world. We relate to the world in a certain way. We generate afflictions with regard to the world, anger, attachment, pride, envy, and so forth. Out of that, we create karma, positive karma, negative karma, and out of this, when we die, especially, we're going to have the fear of non-existence and grasp for another life. We activate karma, and we go back into another bubble, which is starting with the first of the 8 sufferings, the suffering of birth. So So that's the thing. The thing is, there is a self, there's a Buddha, there is emotions, there is feelings, there's happiness, there's suffering, but none of that is inherently existent. It's a mere self, a mere Buddha, a mere emotion, a mere happiness, a mere suffering, and so forth. But that mere suffering needs to be eliminated. You cannot eliminate an inherently existent suffering, because an inherently existent suffering does not exist whatsoever. It's a hallucination of the ignorance. What you try to get rid of is the suffering that exists, which is the mere suffering that cannot be found. It's amazing. This is amazing. Just amazing. This stuff is really, 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 really amazing. This emptiness stuff. So the ignorance is projecting a way of existing that is impossible, which is that things are existing in and out of themselves. The reality is that everything exists in connection with other things. So this can be it gets very sophisticated. If you actually go into philosophy, you will find statements which or presentations of some phenomena that you have never thought of. So that's where you enter into philosophy. You need to like we talk about different things. We talk about ignorance, wisdom, and philosophy, and how does this go together? Yeah, and I think last time I gave you these questions. What does philosophy have to do with this? How does philosophy relate to wisdom? So in the end, the wisdom or the ignorance actually that we are fighting, the actual true origin that produces all our suffering, all our samsara and rebirth, that ignorance has to do with how we perceive that things exist. And we're having a misperception, we're hallucinating a way of existence that has nothing to do with reality. It's even impossible. Nothing can exist in this way that ignorance is hallucinating. So in order to counteract that, what we are hallucinating, we need to generate a wisdom that understands how things actually exist. And that's where the philosophy comes in. Yeah, as I said, I think this is called ontology in the West. Yeah? How a thing exists, what's the entity of something, what's the actual existence, the way of existing. There will be things in this in Western philosophy like, what is the thing in itself and stuff like this. Yes? So that's exactly the question. What is the thing in itself? What am I actually? In the end, am I my hands? Am I my emotions? Am I my depression from yesterday? Am I my desire to buy that thing, that pizza, that dress, whatever? Am I that? But that's already gone. But I'm here all the time. So how can I be that desire from yesterday, or this depression from yesterday, or what am I actually? I'm not physical, I guess, or maybe I am physical. But if I'm physical, I'm on my hands. So all of that. What am I actually? What is actually me? So you have to, this kind of topic, which normally when you listen to philosophy, then you feel like, people, you have nothing to do. Get a life, get out there, be friendly to people, help somebody. Why do you talk about how the thing exists in itself? So here Buddhism, it becomes essential. It becomes essential because the ignorance that is the cause of all of samsara is wrong with regard to how things exist. It has a misperception how we ourselves exist. So it is necessary to go into philosophy and to analyze how do we actually exist, so that we can juxtapose what is the hallucination and what is actually going on. So on the one hand, this will include a certain kind of, let's say, deep psychology part where you would have to understand how we perceive things. Yeah, we would have to find out about what is this inherent existence that the ignorance is projecting on everything. Yeah, how does this look like? How do we experience this in daily life? And on the other hand, once we have that, then we can say, well, if this is how things appear, can they actually exist like that? And then there's many different ways and reasonings, or groups of reasonings, actually 5 sets of reasonings that are in investigating this topic. If something would exist in the way that ignorance is hallucinating, then that and that would follow, but that's not the case. So therefore, it cannot exist like this. So how does it then exist? Well, the opposite is an absence of such an existence. So there needs to be this kind of philosophy. There needs to be this kind of precision. There needs to be definitions. There needs to be analysis. There needs to be this ontology. So therefore, this philosophy, which for me personally, as in my life, I was never into philosophy. I was into religions. I was into the stories of religions. I was into churches, architecture, feelings. I don't know what, but never into philosophy. I found this pretty abstract. But here, it becomes essential. All of a sudden, philosophy is not just something that some very intellectual people are doing as a hobby, but it is really, really necessary to do. And it gets a completely different taste. It's an essential thing to do. So I think I said several times already, I mean, I've got no clue what time it is. What time is it, Anna? Let me look. Oh, wait.
Yeah.
7:35 at you.
Anyway, maybe 2 minutes more. then you're free to go. Or I'm free to go. Everybody's free to go. So sometimes I raise this question: Is Buddhism a religion, or is it a philosophy, or is it a psychology, or what is it? Yeah. And in the end, I would say it's a psychology. And maybe maybe it would be better to say it's a spirituality, because a spirituality wants to work with a spirit, and psychology wants to work with the psyche. So this comes down to the same thing, I guess. It's just that the spirit is probably going much deeper than just the psyche. So I call it a cosmic psychology. So why would anybody think that Buddhism is a religion in the first place? Well, because they have a lot of statues, and they make a lot of offerings, and they have a lot of water bowls there, and they build temples, and they have kind of traditions, and they have holy places, and do pilgrimages, and they have relics. And that's true. But all these religious aspects are understood. They're understood what they do to the mind, and they're used as a tool within the psychological or spiritual process of liberating beings. It's not a goal in itself. Yeah? We are, for example, right now here in the master program, we are studying Tantra, the highest level of Buddhist practice. And Yeshua is just so constantly saying, look, people, these mantras, they're going to work if you understand the meaning, if you reflect on that meaning, if you integrate it, if you understand that all of this is kind of coming out of wisdom, realizing emptiness, and so forth. Yeah. So it's not just the ritual itself. It is not just that kind of sound or something like this. Yeah. So it's really, really very strongly connected to understanding and integrating it into mental processes. So therefore, this spirituality, this cosmic psychology, if you like, is using the religious experience and the religious forms in its psychological power and integrates it into the path. And in the same way with philosophy, the Buddha couldn't care less about truth. The Buddha is not about truth. The Buddha is about happiness. Because our deepest longing is not for truth. Our deepest longing is for not to suffer, but to be happy. And the Buddha, in his compassion, is relating to that. He is so close to us. He is the closest person, the closest being ever in our life. He's just so aware, much more than ourselves, of this longing for a fulfilling happiness and this longing for being at peace. And he's teaching to that state. He's not about truth. He's about happiness and peace. So if truth has nothing to do with happiness and peace, the Buddha couldn't care less about truth. Turns out, truth is the antidote to suffering. Wisdom is the antidote to ignorance. Truth lies at the center of the path, but the goal is still bliss and peace. The bliss of liberation, the bliss of Buddhahood, that's the goal, and not truth. But truth is necessary to utilize. So philosophy is necessary to utilize in the path in order to attain this liberation, in order to attain this lasting happiness. So therefore the Buddha also integrates philosophy, just as he integrates religion. But what it is all about is a transformation of the mind, of the spirit. It's about spirituality, about cosmic psychology. And all the other things are serving that. I mean, very much, they are really at the center. But they are used, they are things to be used. It's not about truth. It's not about something being holy and therefore needing to be treated with respect. It's all about what this does to the mind. It's all about a process of purification, of liberation, and of bringing forth the actual freedom to be happy and joyful. So this is how this all integrates. Yeah, the Buddha is not into kind of founding a new religion and then being worshipped as the leader of this religion or the highest being of this religion, if you like, the god of this religion. That's not his goal. The Buddha is not into truth. He's not into kind of preaching a new philosophy and then being applauded by everybody how intelligent he is or how he is so overly philosophical and stuff like this and wonderful and so forth. This is not his point. His point is solely love and compassion. What love and compassion? Wanting the beings that want to be free of suffering to be in a state of pacification of suffering. Wanting the beings that want to be happy in an eternal way to attain to eternal bliss. That's what the Buddha is about. Right? That being said, I think we have what I saw here in these little pictures. People were making some effort tonight to listen to all this talk. So that's a very positive thing that everybody has engaged in. And so, as I always say, the natural function of the mind is when you engage into this kind of positive thing, like trying to follow that kind of thoughts and then reflect on them yourself and then get some result from that. The natural reaction of the mind is to produce positive karma. Yeah, so that's what has happened without us noticing whatsoever. We have constantly here produced positive karma and we are right now full of this positive karma. So positive karma can only ripen into happiness. It cannot ripen into suffering. Yeah. So this positive karma can ripen into any kind of stuff, any kind of happiness. Yeah. So it can be just kind of some small thing, yeah, that you get a rebirth, that within this rebirth you're born somewhere where there's a lot of chocolate or something. This is completely trivial. It doesn't mean anything. But what you can do is you can take this positive potential and by a dedication you can send it to even much higher goals. So that's a very, very crucial idea in Buddhism, yeah, that you can motivate your mind in the beginning and that you can dedicate the outcome of all of this in the end. Yeah. So maybe we can just spend a minute or two on this dedication to wrap up for today. Yeah. So maybe you can just kind of get yourself into a conducive sitting position and then turn inward a little bit. Feel your body. Sit upright. And then become aware of this fact that you have generated all these positive karmas in this 1 hour of making effort with trying to understand some of the Buddha's teaching, trying to understand something about yourself and about every other living being. And then we can rejoice in that we have been able to do this action. We can make clear to ourselves that we did a positive action, we did a Dharma action right now. We are completely capable of doing Dharma. We rejoice without arrogance. We just tell ourselves, this went well. This was an hour well spent because I engaged with all my heart, with all my intelligence into this topic. I took from it whatever I could take. That went very well. I rejoice in me doing this kind of action. I will do this again because it's beneficial. So I rejoice in my capacity to do virtuous things, dharma actions, and I rejoice in having created this positive karma, the very stuff out of which happiness grows. And then I dedicate this positive karma such that whatever I have understood tonight, may this grow deeper and deeper and integrate into my life, into my mind, into my daily feelings and perceptions and thoughts, and my daily interactions with others. And may this integrate into my life such that it can be more and more helpful and a support for others. And that others are safe from myself so that I don't harm them, but I'm a conducive factor in their life, a support, a help. And then by continuing on this path of wisdom and of compassion, may I be able to go to higher and higher states of understanding and transformation in my mind, so I can even kind of get completely liberated from samsara and attain the happiness that I'm wishing for, a happiness without suffering, an uninterrupted happiness, a complete, lasting, fulfilling bliss. And may I not harm others, but be helpful for others, and may I even become the highest being, the completely enlightened Buddha, as is my nature, so I can help all sentient beings in the highest form and lead them also out of suffering and place them into the bliss of Buddhahood. And then finally being aware of the benefit that comes from the Dharma to the beings that want to be happy and don't want to suffer. Due to my merits that I have accumulated tonight, may the Dharma abide long, and may the teachers that are teaching this Dharma and are living examples of this Dharma, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, may they live long and teach us and spread the Dharma to all sentient beings. Thank you very much. Wonderful. That's it for today. Enjoy your cool weather. Here it is very hot. I'm suffering from the suffering of heat. And yeah, then see you next week, right? So I'm going to send some questions again, but I mean, to some extent, I think you just did some of the questions that I sent you last time. Now maybe you can just continue with the questions I gave you, because we stayed within the topic of the Four Noble Truths. You maybe can just take the questions that you already have. Yeah? Is that enough?
And continue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful. So think about this stuff. I mean, this stuff that we were talking right now is really the essence of what the Buddha has to say. It was actually the very first thing that the Buddha ever said. Yeah, you have this all-pervasive love and compassion going through all the 10 directions, pervading the whole universe, manifesting on this planet because the causes and conditions, the karma of the people is ripe. He manifests on the planet, and the very first thing that he has ever taught was, this is the truth of suffering, this is the truth of origin, this is the truth of cessation, and this is the truth of the path. The very first thing that he ever said. So that was what is kind of the essential thing, the first thing that he had to say. So look at it. It was said for you and for me. I'm going to look at it as well. All right. Have a nice evening. Good night.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Welcome. See you. Bye.
Bye.
Cred că a plecat Anca.
N-a plecat Anca, doar...
M-a plecat.
Unde?
Um,
Uite.